This is the future of Africa. In this program, we focus on Horn of Africa's political, economic, and socio-cultural aspects. Let's share our vision, hopes, and professional critics. All views are esteemed. Stay with us. Mr. Sultan, welcome to this program.
Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Hussein.
Mr. Sultan Qasim is a PhD candidate at Addis Ababa University and OFC's public relations head. He has LLB and his MA is on federalism. Now he is a constitutional law candidate, PhD candidate at Addis Ababa University, and we'll be having discussion with him. Mr. Sultan, thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
So, given your professional background, how do you evaluate the rule of law, justice, and human rights condition in Ethiopia and in Oromia?
All right. Rule of law and constitutionalism, all of these ideas are ideas that would serve us well if we had, a stable political system. In the past 4 years in Ethiopia, we're having a turbulent time and a lot of, situations that has resulted in the deaths and displacement of our people has happened. And the transition, as we expected it, did not go well. And it seems the country is in political turmoil, and we have just trying to come out of a civil war that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and there is also another war going on in Oromia. So within this framework, if we look at the situation in the country, rule of law and constitutionalism, all of these are just ideas that does not have any reflection on the ground, and the situation of our people is getting worse every time.
Thanks so much. And let's look at some of the issues. For instance, before a couple of weeks, high-level judges were imprisoned in Oromia. And do you know the reasons and what is really the implication of that in terms of the rule of law?
It is an interesting situation in Oromia, particularly in Ethiopia in general, and particularly in Oromia. Judges, courts, and the judicial system overall are not respected, and they are despised even by the government system itself. They were supposed to be independent. They were supposed to be the keepers of the justice system, and they were supposed to be kept in high regard by our society and by the executive organ. What's happening is, in the past 4 years, the judicial system previously is weak, now become very much weaker as the day goes on. Their orders, their judgments are not respected. Their orders are not fulfilled by the police, particularly the police, and also by the executive members of the government. They are just ignored. People who are arrested by the police, when they are required to bring on evidences to bring suit against them, they would not produce a single shred of evidence, and the court, according to the law, would be required to release them free if there is no evidence to accuse them of, or to be freed by bail. But most of the time, what we are looking at is people would be released free by the court, but they would be immediately arrested in front of the court, or they will never be out of that prison in the first place. This ignorance or this contravention of the justice system now has grown bigger and stronger, and now judges are being arrested in Oromia while they are conducting public trial, and they are arrested without proper warrant. They have immunity, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, but that guarantee did not work when it comes to judges in Oromia. Mind you, these are judges of the Supreme Court of Oromia. the regional state. And I don't know how far the judicial system would go low, how far the contravention against the constitution would go low in our region. That is very sad situation we are in.
Thanks, Sultan. Let's go to the other angle of it. Now, recently, after actually 2 years war, as you slightly touched upon, the country was immersed into a deep war, and then there was a kind of attempt for peace agreement in South Africa, then Kenya. A lot of things are going on, and currently what's happening there is a kind of turbulence. How do you see the peace agreement and the possibility of its implementation?
I think the peace agreement is a very important development in our country. We have been suffering from this war. It is an unnecessary war, a war which was waged without, without the proper cause. Just it is a power struggle that has descended into a civil war that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and it has raged on for just now 2 years. And last week we have seen some developments which created a sense of hope and a sense of hope that would give some respite for our people, for the people in Tigray and the rest of the country. And this war, if it is going to be implemented, the peace agreement or the cessation of or permanent cessation of hostilities, if it's going to be implemented as per the agreement, would be a positive development that would of course bring our country back to track, at least to some kind of some kind of constitutional headway. In the sense of stabilizing the country. However, the peace agreement which is entered is only between TPLF and the federal government, which is addressing only the part of the turbulence, the political problem in the north, and still an equally devastating war, destructive war is going on in Oromia, and the peace agreement did not touch upon that, and it has totally ignored it, and that really worries us.
We'll be coming back to the condition in Oromia and the implication of that peace agreement to Oromia. But before that, I'd like to capitalize on the issue that's related to the constitution. And the peace agreement is like back to the constitution that was in the constitution which was developed in 1995. You guys and we as elites of the Oromo people, we have been advocating the implementation of that constitution all through. It was rejected, and the government and the other part immersed themselves into war. Now back to the first place, that is the constitution. Yeah. How do you see that as a student of expert and the student of constitution?
The constitution, if it was respected before, we would not have gone into this war. If the constitutional framework has provided a mechanism to deal with this kind of conflicts. And at the same time, we have been calling us OFC, as Oromo people, we have been calling that this war is not necessary. We need to bring the discussion to the table, and politics has to be done on the table through discussion, through round discussion, and it should not necessarily be through the barrel of the gun. We know what the barrel of the gun brings us. And at the end of the day, after 2 years of war, after that much of human suffering and destruction of property, we are back to the constitutional framework, and we are happy at least that this war could be over, and we are happy that the two warring parties have agreed to respect the constitution and to bring their political discussion, to bring their conflict, to resolve it through the constitutional framework. The constitution is our arbiter. The constitution is the framework that we have to agree upon, and we have to implement the solution it provides for such kind of political disagreements. And the cessation of hostilities agreement signed in Pretoria, and also the follow-up agreement that is signed in Kenya between the leaders of the armed forces on both sides, shows that there is a possibility to come to the constitutional framework, and that would be, I think, a good sign, a positive development for our country.
That could have been the base for that nation, and had it been that constitution respected, we couldn't have immersed ourselves into this kind of war. Let me take you to the other side of our discussion. What do you think will be the implication of this peace agreement to Oromia? And as we see, there are some tendencies whereby, okay, solving the northern part of the problem through peace agreement, and then how about Oromia? There is a tendency of, you see, using force. As you said, political problems should be solved politically. You have been advocating this personally as OFC, and we all have been advocating this. But there is a tendency of, you see, not using the same pattern. How do you see this?
First of all, the war in Oromia has been going on for the past maybe 4 years, or at least 3 years, and it has not been given due attention. It has been ignored by the media in Ethiopia. It has been ignored by the international media. It has also been ignored by the international community. People are suffering, and we are happy that the war in the north is, it's going to be over. It will be over soon, hopefully. And the northern war has overshadowed the war in Oromia, the suffering in Oromia, and now international attention, the public attention could come to Oromia. The implication of the peace agreement between TPLF and the federal government would be, we hope, would be a stepping stone in order to assess the past steps the government has been taking, or the two parties have been taking to resolve their political differences through war. It's not working. It's not working. It has, claimed hundreds of thousands of lives of our people, and finally they are back to square one, where they have started to resolve their dispute, to resolve their differences through the constitutional mechanism to the table. And if the logic that worked for the North, that means at the end of the day, we need to come back to our constitutional framework to resolve our problem through discussion, that logic should also work for Oromia. There is no reason why we follow a peace mechanism or the system of agreement in order to end the war in the north, and we cannot strongly argue to go on with the same kind of faulty line of reasoning in order to resolve the political problem in Oromia through the same war that did not work. We have tested it in the north. They have also seen it in the past in Oromia. It's not working because the issue is a political problem, and political problems would have to be resolved through political means. It requires a political settlement, and we cannot bring peace from the barrel of the gun. So the implication should be the logic of resolving conflicts through peace discussion and through agreement should also work for Oromia. From what we can see from the tendencies of the government and the public speech the Prime Minister gives, and also other medias that are trying to talk about the war in Oromia, it doesn't seem that they are learning any lesson from what we have in the north, and also from the past 4 years, what is happening in the past 4 years in Oromia. They want to resolve this through war, through force, through bloody bombardment of civilians. It does not work, and it should not be pursued any longer. Any person with the same mind should not repeat the same mistake that has, claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and it should not be advocated. But unfortunately, we are going to be, following the same line, a faulty line, which would end up in killing civilians, more civilians, in extending human suffering in Oromia, particularly in the western part of Oromia, in the central around Shawa, and also southern parts of Oromia.
Thanks so much, Mr. Sultan. That's a very deep analysis. And let's push our discussion a bit from implications and forecasting. What's happening in practice is really devastating now. Drone attacks and burning villages, killing people, particularly innocent people, children, elders, women, so on. What is that? Why killings of the innocent people is taken as an option by the government?
The ruling party wants to hang on power, and it seems it has decided to use every power in its hand in order to cling on that power. If it is necessary, they would be using drones, and that is what happened in some parts of Shawa, in Jobi, and other parts of Oromia. And those drones are dropping rockets that cost, thousands of dollars per each firing of the rocket. And sometimes, if you do the cost analysis, not just for getting the human suffering, it would have constructed schools, a single rocket, So it could be sometimes the way people in power think to survive. They don't seem to understand the feeling, the suffering of the people, or they intentionally ignore it. And you don't see any reporting in Ethiopian media. Sometimes people on the ground speak to foreign medias to report the civilian deaths, the bombardment of villages, the bombardment of churches, the bombardment of markets. And this is really sad that our government, or the government in power, does not give any due care for the civilian life. If they are fighting, armed forces, they have to fight, and they have to be very careful not to harm civilians. We are saying this for both parties who are, in fighting. Not only the government, but also the other side, they have to be very careful about civilians. But what is happening on the ground is civilians are dying, and civilians are dying with drone rockets. That is really sad.
Okay, let's a little move to the other point. That is, given your position as OFC public relation head, OFC, it has been struggling through peaceful approach, and it seems that the behavior of Ethiopian government, particularly the ruling party, has been changing, and there is a tendency of closing doors for peace struggle. And how do you see this, and what's going to be a practical way of doing it? Because first of all, to struggle through peaceful approach, there must be, the government should open its doors, and people need to create some kind of pressure to open the door and then exercise a peaceful struggle. How do you see this from your side?
OFC is a legally registered political party, and our main method or our main strategy to bring political change in this country is through peaceful struggle. That is a political struggle through a civil way of political struggle by organizing our people, by rallying our people behind our cause. We believe that armed struggle would not bring the necessary change we want in this country. For the past 40 or 50 years, the Oromo people have struggled in different ways, through armed means, through peaceful struggle, and some of them were successful, some are not successful. In the state of affairs in the country, the peaceful struggle the people have made, the peaceful struggle the Gero have made has brought change in the regime, has brought change that was not achievable or deemed not achievable maybe before 5 or 6 years. And peaceful struggle somehow works in Ethiopia, but that political opening, the moment of change, was not sustainable. And this is not necessarily because the peaceful struggle does not work, but the necessary elements to make the peaceful struggle to go through, to be sustainable, to bring a change in government, a change in the governance system has not been properly lined out. The Gero has struggled, they sacrificed their lives, they stood in front of bullets of Agazi, and they brought a change. But that change did not, finally result in the establishment of a government through proper election, because we did not have strong political institutions that were capable of shouldering that change and finally ending to its logical conclusion, establishment of a public or a civilian government that is properly elected through constitutional means. And since this political opening, moment of change has closed very fast, a lot of those Geros have swayed out of this peaceful struggle, and many of them are desperate. They are desperate, they are worried, and they are choosing a different way, to struggle through armed means. But still, we believe that the peaceful struggle, we have different type of strategies through peaceful struggle we can use to create pressure against the ruling regime to change its behavior. But the more the ruling government, the ruling party uses force, the more it is strengthening the narrative of struggling through armed means. But this would not benefit our country, this would not benefit the Oromo people in general. What would benefit more for us is actually a peaceful struggle that would bring a democratic change in the country and establish a government elected by the people through the constitutional means. And we still continue. We would not, we would not become desperate, and we would not in any way falter from our way. We still support, we will still argue in favor of peaceful struggle in this country. Peace and the struggle we are on would, of course, be more successful if the government was a kind of government that would be more democratic. But this is not this is not actually going to happen soon. But still, we will be fighting on.
As you clearly indicated, the peaceful struggle did work well, particularly during the youth movement from 2014 to 2018, to the extent of creating huge pressure for kind of change by the government, not radical actually change. And I personally feel that that was hijacked by the unitary bloc, and they pushed the government into a kind of war those who dream about the past, the golden age they call it, and kind of one nation, one language, one flag, one culture, and so on. That's my belief. Do you agree with this? It's a kind of hijacking the result of the youth movement. You have clearly indicated, actually, we had no strong institutional foundations and kind of things, but I personally feel that it was hijacked. How do you see this judgment?
Of course, it's not new that popular movement is being taken over the rails. I mean, hijacked or misused by people who are close to power, or people who were, or groups who were, waiting for a moment to grab power. This happened not to the movement, to the Cairo movement in 2018, but in Ethiopian history, this also happened during the 1974 revolution. Sure. Ethiopian student movement, as you remember, has created a tendency for change, a real change in the country. It has fundamentally rooted the power source or the power foundations of the imperial government. It has brought about a revolutionary change in this country. It has initiated a revolution. The problem is the students were not organized in a political institutions that were capable of becoming governments. They are just popular movements. The same was the situation for the Cairo movement. Had it been the Cairo movement backed by strong political institutions, strong political parties at the time, this would not have occurred. And still, we believe that even if that is hijacked, even if that has been hijacked, it did not even serve those who have hijacked it. What happened was they have, they have been waiting for moment of change. They grabbed the power and they have thrown the country into fire. They have thrown the country into hell. Our people are suffering because the transition did not go well in the proper manner. It did not bring a government which is elected by the people as the Cairo wanted, as the Oromo people wanted, as the Amara people wanted. Some groups who are waiting for a moment, they hijacked it, but they still were not benefiting it because it has caused so much suffering and it has caused so much blood in this country. And that I think we should be learning. It is a costly lesson that we are learning. We are learning after the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. It is a costly lesson, but we have to learn. If the popular movement did not bring into real political change in this country, we will end up still in another civil war. That is what is happening in Ethiopia. So we have to be able to assess our failure as political institution, as a society which has created a movement for change, and also be able to learn our lesson how to pressure governments and establish governments which are really elected by the people, and not to be hijacked, as you have mentioned.
Thank you so much. Really, that's great reflection. We tend to learn after the fact. That's great, because look at this. The country did immerse into a damaging war for about 2 years. Look at where we are in terms of economy, in terms of politics, in terms of diplomacy. That's a huge loss that we might not unfold in the coming 10, 20 years. Let me ask you about the fallacies I'm observing. Within this environment, I mean, war, drought, famine, corruption, and so on, the government is still claiming for economic growth, economic development, prosperity, what have you, kind of rosy flowers. What is the magic over there? Because there is a drought everywhere, famine everywhere, problems after problem, but these rosy flowers are everywhere, including in the speech to the parliament. How do you see as a matured politician in this regard?
The ruling government seems to be out of touch with reality in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is currently in economic crisis. The national reserve of foreign currency in the country would not be lasting, for more than 3 weeks. That's, a statement from IMF, and also the Ethiopian government admits to that. The country, particularly to the east and southern part of this Ethiopia, the Somali region, the Oromia region, and some part of SN and EPR are hit by drought. And the drought that would have been controlled, that would not have turned into hunger. But people are dying because of hunger. Not only by the drought, but because of hunger. People are dying because of hunger. More than 20 million people are currently in need of emergency assistance, as OCHA and other UN agencies report. The war has created a lot of people to be hungry in the northern part of this country, around 13 million people in between Amhara, Afar region, and also the Tigray region. And we are having this much of trouble, but the people in power do not want to see, or they don't want to worry about this, and even they don't seem to listen to people crying. They are somehow they have created a rosy picture of this country, which is visible only to them, not to the public, and they are actually living a life that is, seems fantasy, a life of fantasy. They are building, they are proposing building a palace. The prime minister was talking about, 3 days, I think, before, about a palace that would be a satellite city that may cost up to 1 trillion Ethiopian birr. And we don't feel that this is money properly placed to the need of the country. As human beings, as responsible leaders, we feel that we need to look at the suffering of the people and give some kind of respite, some kind of relief to the people who are hungry on the ground. But they don't feel the hunger, they don't feel the pain, and they don't even try to understand the feeling of the people. And people, even in the towns, they are suffering from a shortage of basic necessities like sugar, which is produced in Ethiopia and imported somehow, but they are even do not even try to understand the situation on the ground. It seems they are living in a world of fantasy, which is out of touch, or even they don't want to try to understand the situation of the people, and that is really very disconcerting, very disconcerting. And at the same time, they are talking about economic development that even world analysts, economists were not able to understand the survival or resilience of the Ethiopian economy. But the economy is in shambles. The economy is, in devastation, in downward spiral. But they don't want to admit that. They want to create a rosy picture, which they are able to see, but the Ethiopian citizens do not see that rosy picture. That is really disconcerting for us.
Thanks so much. It seems fallacy claiming economic growth, economic development amid, you see, a kind of deep war, because the production possibility curve definitely shrinks down. But let me single out two important things. One is inflation. Now inflation is skyrocketing in the country. As you said, the purchasing power of birr is almost, $1 to 100 something. The second important thing, which was slightly touched upon by the Prime Minister, is about corruption. And corruption is really getting a system, a trend in that nation, you see, distracting the entire system. How do you see these two major, daunting challenges, if you like, inflation and corruption?
To start from the corruption has now become a culture. It has become systemic. When something becomes systemic, it would be very difficult to pin out those who have, become corrupt, because the whole system seems to have been, affected by this corruption. You are not able to get a single service from the public institutions, from government institutions, a single service without paying, without having connections. And this is really how the corruption has become cancerous. And it seems, in the hindsight, the ruling government seems to have tried to handle this situation in the ordinary way, and finally they were not successful. Auditors are reporting embezzlement of public money in millions from different institutions. No action is being taken. And finally, it seems the Prime Minister realized that this situation is getting out of hand, and it seems they have established a committee or some kind of special committee to handle this. I don't think this committee, as it exists now, would be able to single out the systemic problem. The problem is not individual now, it is systemic. And this requires a total overhaul from top to down. And it seems corruption has got, a life of its own, and capable of defending itself from the anti-corruption forces in this country. And it's going to be a very challenging situation for even the Prime Minister to single out. And to the other side, you may even see this corruption could be a political tool. This corruption could be a political tool to purge out those people who do not necessarily agree to the terms the ruling party says or whatever, rather than purifying the country of corruption. It could be a political tool. And we have seen that during the TPLF time. We have seen that also in our history. So if corruption should be handled, it should be handled in a systemic way that would be capable of purging the whole, bringing an overhaul change. But establishing a committee, I don't think it would work. Coming to the inflation issue is basically an issue that is going on for the past 3 to 4 years, and it is because of the wrong economic decisions the government is, or policy the government is following. It is, first of all, economists could provide a better analysis, but from what we can see, they have devalued the currency. And that is said to be to encourage exporters. But Ethiopia is a country that is, importing more than it exports. There is a huge trade imbalance, and because of that, devaluation of Ethiopian currency would not bring a lot, because we are sending a lot of raw products, unprocessed products, and getting a lot of a small amount of dollars. And at the same time, we are devaluating our money, but we are buying a lot of items from abroad through dollars. And this would actually unnecessarily reduce the value of money in Ethiopia, and this would be one cause of inflation. The other cause of the inflation actually is the war itself. The war is, spending. We are spending billions. And the devastation is in billions. Factories have been destroyed. Productive sectors like the industry, the tourism has totally cut out because of the war, and this has actually resulted in a bleeding economy that would create a little production and a lot of consumption, a lot of unproductive expenditure that would not have any real return to the economy. And because of that, we are having a lot of double digit inflation that is harming a lot particularly the public servants. The public servants are harmed a lot. They are even those who are not able to pay their rent. They are not able to pay for the food of their children. And this is actually devastating the middle class, if at all a middle class exists. And at the same time, the rich people, those who are economically powerful, would not be harmed because they would still, if any price increase occurs, the traders would increase on the consumers, and it is the brunt of the burden would be actually felt not by the trading community or not by the wealthy people, but by the poor who are, living day by day. And that is really a worrisome situation. And I think the government is, or the ruling government is taking an action which is very late, but which could be considered positive by restricting the importation of some items, some considered to be luxury items, around 38 items, and still it is just a painkiller. The fundamental problem is the war and the bad economic policy they are following, and it has to be stopped. Unless the war stopped, unless political stability came to this country, the inflation would go on, and that would be devastating.
Great reflection. I think the direct cost and the indirect cost, opportunity cost of war is obvious. That dollar could have been used for agriculture, education, health, what have you. So we are dropping dollars each day at the expense of the life of people. It's always really great to discuss with insiders like you. And now we are to the end of our conclusion. Let me ask you one question. What do you advise to the international community? Perhaps before the international community, what do you advise the Ethiopian government, Ethiopian people, the international community, and specifically the Oromo people?
I would advise for the Ethiopian people to listen to understand the mechanism government is using, first of all, or those people in power are using to incite or to encourage war. And still there are people in government and ministerial positions who are still advocating for war in Oromia. They are saying the situation in Oromia should be handled by a force, by power, through fire. And these are people who have been advising the government, the prime minister, to wage war on Tigray. And we have seen how the Tigray war ended. And at the same time, the same people are advising the same kind of war. And the people should be very careful. They should be able to understand what is going on. They should not be listening to the warmongers in our country. They are warmongers. They seem to be profiting from the death of the people, from the suffering of human beings. And they should be able to say, we need peace, we need political stability, we need democracy in this country. So the people have power. They have to ask why we need to have a war, another round of war in Oromia. So they should be able to speak up. They should be able to criticize those who are calling for war in this country. And I would still advise the government to learn from the mistakes they have done, to learn from the blood that has been spilled unnecessarily in the north and in the past years in Oromia. The bloodshed has to end, and the suffering has to end. And it should not be like in Tigray, 500,000 or 800,000 people should not die in Oromia to understand that we need peace. So they have to extend the peaceful hand they have extended to the Tigray, and the same logic should apply to the situation in Oromia. We cannot, they cannot win, or they cannot destroy a political question through the barrel of the gun. They have to negotiate. They have to understand the situation, and it has to be through political mechanism. the cause of the war, the cause of the problem is political by nature, and it requires political mechanisms to resolve it. And we want political settlement. As OFC, we have been advocating for this for the past 4 years, and at the same time, we are still voicing our concern. We are voicing our worry about the direction the government seems to be taking in relation to the war in Oromia. The international community, I think, has been ignoring the war in Oromia. I don't know how much they would understand the suffering of our people on the ground. The focus of attention, the center of attention has been in Tigray in the past 2 years, but the same level of destructive war is going on in Oromia. The international community would be at the peril of our people if they ignore the war in Oromia. They should not have ignored. The AU should not have ignored the war in Oromia. The AU, the international community, should not have ignored the war in Oromia, even in the current peace agreement that is entered between TPLF and the federal government. And at the same time, unless war has ended in Oromia, you could not expect stability and peace in Ethiopia. You know, sometimes they make a very wrong, illogical kind of argument. Oromia is the biggest state, the most populous state in the country, and Oromia's stability is being harmed by the day. And the war, the civil war, the conflict in Oromia was previously very far away from the center, in the southern tip or in the western part of this country. But now it is coming to the center. The people in the 4 Shoa provinces are being harmed because of this war. The armed groups are becoming stronger because the government is pushing away peaceful mechanism of politics, and it is strengthening the narrative of armed struggle. And this would actually be harming the country, would be harming the government. At the same time, it's harming our people. And the international community, unless they understand that the peace in Oromia is essential for peace in Ethiopia, they would be making another round of mistake. And we should learn from the past 2 years. We should learn from the missed opportunities we have made in the past years since 2018. War has to end in Oromia. That is my message.
Thanks so much. That's a great advice, and it's sad that some of the ministers in that country, including the Ministry of Education, they tend to advocate war, particularly in his speech last week, I guess. The minister was talking about the need for continuity of war in Oromia, and that's sad. And as you said, it's very clear that unless peace is there in Oromia, unless the problem of Oromia is solved, the problem of that nation cannot be solved because of facts like number of population in terms of geography. That's the giant elephant in the house. That's very clear. And finally, given your professional background and your political affiliation, if you have some kind of final remark again, I would like to give you opportunity to be said out in a split of second.
Yeah, just, our country is great. We have, hardworking people. Most of our problems are political. And these political problems should be solved through political means. And as politicians, we should give, a chance for our people to choose how they are going to be governed. The direction of the government the government was taking in a way of trying to dismantle the multinational federal system has backfired. It has resulted in civil war in the north. It has resulted in war in Oromia. And unless the government is going back from this direction, trying to dismantle the federal system, the multinational federal system, unless they opt for democracy, instability would continue in this country. So I would, in a way, try to give to try to show my concern that the federal system in this country has got its own problems because it's not properly implemented, but it could be a great system that would provide a solution for most of our political ailments, starting from the establishment of modern Ethiopia. And if we have to make a change, it has to be through the constitutional means, through the will of the public, not by the will of the people in the political echelons. And this has been practically seen what would happen if they try to challenge the federal system as it exists. A generation has been raised in this federal system, and the federal system could be a great system if it was properly implemented. And if there is a need for change, we have to do it through a peaceful and a constitutional mechanism that respects the sovereignty of the people. And otherwise, it would result in another round of civil war, and that should not happen.
Thanks so much. Respect the will of people. That's great advice. And with this, we conclude our discussion with a very young emerging scholar and politician, a PhD candidate, Mr. Sultan Qasim. And for those of you who have professional critics, views, visions, the door is open. Please contact me through my Facebook. My name is Hussein Kader. Mr. Sultan, profoundly thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
This is the future of Africa. In this program, we focus on Horn of Africa's political, economic, and sociocultural aspects. Let's share our vision, hopes, and professional critics. All views are stemmed. Stay with us.